Good morning, everyone. Now we're learning from the book Torah Or, which was written by the first Rebbe of Chabad, like we say, about 250 years ago, shortly after he was miraculously freed from Tsarist prison, where he was put by his Jewish religious enemies that thought that his innovations and his attempt to change everybody's attitude and approach to Judaism was anti-Judaism, and which in a way it was right. It was anti the Judaism that they thought was Judaism, which was a very, how do you say, closed up religious olam hazeh, olam haba, trying to get to the world to come Judaism. And the Rebbe was trying to fix up the physical world. He was trying to please God, not to please ourselves, and not to go to the spiritual worlds. So he de-emphasized egotism. He de-emphasized what we're going to get from the world, and he emphasized enthusiasm. When a person stops thinking about himself, so he's enthusiastic. Here we go. He can be enthusiastic about what he is thinking about the truth. So let's 1 second. There we go. Okay. And so what did we say before? What did we say yesterday? The Greeks. The Greeks were the epitome. They were the personification of egotism. Egotism, pleasure loving, power loving, intellect loving, egotism loving people. They were the epitome of squeezing every moment of pleasure out of this world as you could. And the Jews liked it. And the Greeks with their philosophy and with their power and with their this. So they conquered the whole world. And they made a big thing out of beauty and out of fun and out of whatever sports, competition, and they had plays and philosophy and music. I don't know what type of music they had actually, but imagine they did. You'd have a play after have music. Anyway, if they did have music, it didn't come down to us. But I imagine that every type of pleasure, I don't know if there's any pleasure that's that compares to music. Music is a tremendous pleasure for those people who like music. So I'm sure they got anyway every type of pleasure you could possibly have. They had these big statues over there that are existing to this day. And you go to Greece, you look at the Acropolis and all this stuff, and all these things are the relics. Now they're all relics. The whole thing, Greece is already gone, right? The glory that was Rome, it's all gone. It's all gone. It's sort of hard to figure out exactly what was going on over there, but that's what it was. So we still know the great Greek philosophers and the great Greek, how do you say, say different types of philosophy they had and the different schools of philosophy over there, the Epicureans and this and so the Jews really liked it, and it ended up that we got our holiday of Purim of Chanuka from that. Why? Because the Greeks took over the whole world, and they also took over the Jewish hearts of the Jewish people, and they defiled. Their whole thing was defiling. Defiling. What does it mean to defile? Defile means instead of things being devoted to the Creator, they're devoted to me. So they went into the Holy Temple and they just touched all the oil, and they offered up an unclean animal on the altar or whatever it was. But they didn't destroy the altar and they didn't pour out the oil. Okay. So come along a handful of Jews and they made a war against this. Okay. Now the Rebbe goes into this business of the lights that were lit. The holiday of Chanuka is a holiday of lights. And so the Rebbe says light is a physical thing, but it comes from a source. There's a source of light. Now light is pretty amazing. If you look at light, it's pretty incredible light. You go into a dark room and you stay in a dark room long enough, you become depressed and you become scared and you feel alone. All of a sudden somebody turns on the lights. Surprise, there's a big table and it's all filled with food. It's got your best friends are sitting there and they're having a good time, and you can learn Torah, and you can do the commandments, and you're not alone, and you're not scared, and you're not afraid, and you're not hungry. All you do, you just turn on the light. So light reveals what there is, what there is. And so the same thing is the light of God. The light of God reveals what there is. Jewish people would go 3 times a year to the Holy Temple, and they would feel God. They would feel, what does it mean you feel God? You feel you're being created. You feel that there's a creator that's creating me, and that I can serve the creator, and I can reciprocate. I can actually pay the creator back a little bit. That's called tshuva, return. I can return to God a little bit what I owe him. That's a good feeling. That's a good feeling. You feel that you're being created, and that every fiber of your body has a purpose, and nothing is there by accident, and that you are in tune with a higher reality than of yourself, and that you're supposed to be here in the world. That's the point. You're supposed to be here in the world. It doesn't make any difference what your parents were thinking when you were conceived, or whatever. If you are supposed to be here, God arranged it, but that's the way you're supposed to be. Well, listen, you can look in this week's Torah portion, right? And you can see last week's Torah portion. But it's pretty amazing that Moshiach comes from this very sort of illicit relationship, huh? That first of all, anyway, that Yehuda, he's walking on the road, he sees a woman, and he thinks that she's a prostitute, and he pays her money, and really it happens to be his daughter-in-law. And the children that she have, one of the children that comes out of this relationship is Peretz. And from Peretz comes out Mashiach. Eventually comes out Mashiach, right? Peretz, and then eventually comes Yishai and Boaz and Yishai. And then eventually comes out David. And David is the Mashiach. So if you have a bad background and you come from some sort of a not so how do you say, shining history, what they call pedigree. So don't worry about it. That's where Mashiach comes from. There's nothing better than Mashiach. You can't get any greater than that. So that's okay. So the Rebbe says there are two different revelations, 2 different ways of different types of light, if you want to call it, of God. And they're both symbolized by the same name, Yud Kei Vav Kei. And there's one time that it says that and it comes from the sentence. One second, let me just find the sentence. Just 1 minute. I wanted to look it up. I'm sorry, I got all sorts of excuses, but I didn't feel good yesterday. So as a result, I have to make up all these excuses. Okay. Anyway, so there's a sentence that says that God is my light. God lightens up my darkness. Ata Neri, God, you are my lamp. And God, same name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, you illuminate my darkness. So he says, God is my lamp. This is talking about normal holiness like it was in the Holy Temple. And that you illuminate my darkness, this is a type of godliness which is needed in order to illuminate the exile, the darkness of exile. And that is signified by it says in the Talmud that there's 7 shepherds of the Jewish people, and there's the 8 anointed men. And the 7 shepherds, that's for normal times, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, etc. And then there's the 8 anointed men, that's the number 8, that's for difficult times. It says that Mashiach is going to be one of them. He's going to come from and that's basically the number 8, which is the light of Chanuka. So we are actually lighting up the lights, when we light the lights of Chanuka now, which is one of the reasons why we still keep Chanuka now, even non-religious people. And they light 8 candles, even more than in the temple, because this is the light of Judaism, which shines in the time of exile. The light of godliness, the creator of the world, that shines even in the darkest places. And just like I said before, light shines, it makes a new world. And so it is when Jewish people all of a sudden wake up that they're Jews. And so then they realize that they have this tremendous job and to tell the non-Jews that it's okay. It's all right. They don't have to worry. God is creating them. God is with them. God cares about them. Zonam Afarnes the call, Metiv the call. God provides for everybody and he benefits everybody. Huh? That's pretty heavy duty that we've got. Okay, let's go. So it says, if so, now we can understand the argument between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Remember we talked about that? What's happened over here? Now we can understand the Gemara that says that Beit Shammai says that you start out on the first day, you light 8 candles, and then you get less. And Beit Hillel says the first day of Chanuka, you light 1 candle, and then you get more. We did this yesterday. Beit Shammai says that we learn from the oxes that were sacrificed on Sukkot, the holiday of Sukkot, when there was the holy temple. So they used to bring sacrifices in the temple, right? So on the holiday of Sukkot, in addition to the other sacrifices, the holiday sacrifices that they offered, but there was something unique over there that they offered up 70 oxes. In the course of the 7 days of Sukkot, they offered up 70 oxes, but they didn't just do 10 every day. They didn't do 10 every day. The first day, they offered up 13. Then the next day, 12. Then the next day, 11. Then the fourth day, the middle day, they offered up 10. And then the next day, they offered up 9, and then 8, and then 7. So it came out an average of 10 every day. So Beit Shammai said, let's do that for Chanuka, right? Where do we find in the whole Torah that there was a change in number of serving God? In the oxes of Sukkot, the oxes that were offered on Sukkot. We don't find any other example of changing numbers. So that's it. We'll just take that. That's our example. Beit Hillel said no. And we start off with 1. We don't learn from the oxes of Sukkot. We don't learn. The oxes of Sukkot, true, they got less and less. But this is Hanukkah. This is different. Hanukkah, have to make up a new order. We start off with the small number and then we get bigger. Not like on Sukkot where we start off with a big number. Okay, why? So it says, Beit Shammai said that first of all, we start out with a big number. That because what are we doing over here? What are we doing? Why are we offering up these oxes at all? Why are we doing anything? Why are we doing Torah? Why are we doing the commandments? Why? What's the point? And there's so many details in the commandments. What do you need them for? He says the reason is because we want to make this physical world holy. It's a challenge, a tremendous, difficult, exact challenge, like making a brain operation. When you make a brain operation, it's a very difficult challenge. You want to make this person healthy, and so you have to be very, very exact everything you do. But when you do it, it's a tremendous satisfaction, right? You brought life to this person, you keep the person alive, right? A brain operation. It doesn't take so much precision to, let's say, wash the floor, paint your house. It takes a certain degree of precision, yeah, but nothing like a brain operation, right? You have to know how to cut through the skin. They have to avoid the nerves. You have to know. There's a tremendous precision. Then you have to close it back up again. That's what Torah and the commandments are. Very, very precise because we're bringing life into the world. We're healing the world. We're healing the world. If Adam would not have eaten from the tree, the job would have been easier. But he did eat from the tree, so the job is difficult. But nonetheless, the world basically is good. The world basically is healthy. The world basically is, but we have to bring it out, though. Right now, it's sick. So it says Shammai, that's why we do the commandments. That's the purpose of these oxes, 70 oxes corresponding to the 70 nations. And it's something like that, says Beit Shammai, the lighting of the candles of Chanuka. We start out big. We get big. First of all, in the oxes of Sukkot, they start up with 13. 13, that corresponds, that's according to Beit Shammai. According to everybody. But Beit Shammai learned from the oxes, that we should do the same thing. Start out with a big number on Chanuka. Start out with a big number, 8. The law is not like that. What did they do on Sukkot? They started with the number 13. That corresponds to the 13, what's called the 13 attributes of mercy. Shehem, Makifim, these are surrounding levels. What are the 13 attributes of mercy? Where did this come from? It's written in the Torah in Parshat Kitisa, where the Jewish people worshiped the golden calf. So that was a pretty big sin. That was pretty, major sin. I think we can say possibly the worst sin that is ever done in the history of mankind was worshiping the golden calf. Worse than Adam eating from the tree. Adam ate from the tree, he was tricked, his wife tricked him, whatever it was. Okay, that's no real excuse for that either. But the Jews worshiping the golden calf, that was really off the wall. I mean, they all heard God say, don't do it. The first two commandments of the 10 commandments, don't worship any idol. Only the God that took you out of Egypt are you allowed to worship. I'm the God that took you out of Egypt. Don't worship any other God. They heard it. Anyway, we've been through this too many times. And nevertheless, as soon as Moses was gone, they worshiped the golden calf. As soon as they thought Moses wasn't going to come back, they worshiped the golden calf. Okay, so God says, Moses, I'm going to wipe them all out. I'll start anew. I'm going to wipe all the Jews out, and I'm going to make a new Jewish people from you. Huh? I'm not going to wipe out all the Jewish people. There'll be Jewish people, but the ones that you see here that participated actively, passively in the golden calf, is say goodbye to them, because that's it. And I'm going to make you into a Jewish people, and they won't give you all this trouble. And then Moses said, no. If you're going to do that, God, then wipe me out too. Wipe me out too. And Moses prayed, and God gave him the 13 attributes of mercy. He gave him the 13 attributes of mercy. Some people say that this is after he prayed for the second time for 40 days. Prayed for 40 days. God gave him the second attribute. The 13 attributes of mercy. What are the 13 attributes of mercy? That no matter what sin the Jewish people do, no matter how terrible it is, it can't get much worse than the golden calf. Can't get much worse than the golden calf. Anyway, nowadays the sins that people do are in ignorance, right? In ignorance. The government of Israel, they let all these missionaries in. That's idolatry, but they don't know any better. They don't know any better. They themselves are completely confused. The Jewish people here, they knew better, right? When they got out of Egypt, God took them all out, gave them food from heaven, who split the sea. They all saw it. They heard God. Anyway, so no excuse for that. God said, okay, I'll give you the 13 attributes of mercy. You say these 13 attributes of mercy, and that'll fix everything up. If you say it genuine. So first of all, you have to, you want to fix things up. First of all, you draw it on the 13 attributes of mercy. Then afterwards, you can get less and less. That's what they do every Sukkot. It should be Om Rishon. Therefore, on the first day, after the first day, Ein Surech, you don't have to, La Ora Gadola, you don't have to bring such a big revelation. Hine, behold, Chanuka, and Chanuka, let me make this thing bigger over here. Second, 1 minute. Okay. In the Chanuka Gamkein Mamshichim, also we have to have this level of Makifim, the surrounding level of godliness that's above even the Torah, above everything that brings forgiveness. And Chanuka also they had to have this surrounding level. And by means of this, Nidachim will be pushed away, the klippas, the evil powers of evil. But Chanukah was not exactly the same thing as Sukkot. Sukkot is a commandment from God. Chanukah comes from us. We had to make a war. Savuni b'shem Hashem ke'amilam. It's one of the Psalms. We say it also in Hillel. Mainly, savuni means surrounding me. The only way that we could defeat the Greeks was from a power which was above normal, above human. So they had to draw down from this surrounding level, just like the 13 attributes of mercy. That's what it means, Tov Lachasos Me Hashem. That's what it means, it's good. This is also part of the Psalms that we say. It's good to rely on God, better to rely on God than to rely on man. In other words, only with God could they have defeated the Greeks. Only They had to have a power which is above their human abilities. That's called the surrounding level. That's like the 13 attributes of mercy. They had to fight on their own. And Sukkot, because Sukkot comes from the Torah, ain't all Yidei Melchama. It's not by means of a war. Ela shenasu be nichnaim. But the powers of selfishness, of evil, of that oppose the Torah, oppose God, nickname, they are subjugated automatically by means of this revelation. God put it in the Torah. You just do what it says in the Torah. You open up this revelations from above. Kavan, since the Shnei Anyanim, since that both of these things, both Sukkot, to bring blessing to the non-Jews and to also to subjugate them, so that they're able to receive these blessings. And on Chanuka, they also had to fight against the non-Jews. But both of these things require a blessing from this level of makifim, a surrounding level. Okay, and therefore, Malamdim, Beit Shammai learns from the Neros Chanukah, the lights of Chanukah, Mipari Achag, from the axes of Sukkot. Shemitchila, that, and then first you have to start out with the big number. Gilei Gadol is a big revelation. And afterwards, the revelation can get less and less. Briachag. Right? That's what base Shem. They used to make these types of war. I think maybe still they do now. First of all, they would have cannons or bombing. They would give them a big, the enemy, they give them a big bombing or something like that. And then when they sort of shook them up, and then they would attack. They would attack. So that's what Beit Shammai said. First of all, we have to give them a big bomb. And that's the 13 attributes of mercy. We'll start off big, like they do on Chanukah. We'll start off with 8 candles, and then we'll get less. Beit Hillel, somebody they say, no. And we don't learn from the axis of the holiday. We don't learn. We don't get a big number first and a small number afterwards. You start off with a small number. Why? Ma'alim b'kodesh. There's a law that says you always increase in holiness and you do not decrease. What's Beit Shammai say? What's Beit Hillel say? I'm sorry. What does Beit Hillel say? If you start off with a number 13, so next day, if you start off with a number 8 on lighting candles, so the next day you'll have to have less. That's not, we don't do things like that in holiness. We always increase in holiness. In holiness, you don't decrease. Why is it that in the holiday of Sukkot that we do decrease? That's an exception. That's an exception. Sukkot is an exception. We can't learn from that. If it depends on us, then we have to increase all the time in holiness. The holiday of Sukkot comes from God. God made it. So God can start out big and he can get smaller. But we can't. If we do, we also have to elevate. In holiness, you always have to increase. Perush, what does it mean? The lo dami l'limud zeh miparechag. You can't learn the laws of Chanuka from the axes of Sukkot. Kichag Sukkot, the holiday of Sukkot comes from the Torah. And the Torah, michachmei Allah, comes from God's wisdom. Milamai lamata, from above to below. When God gave the Torah, he gave from above to below. It was a revelation of God. If so, the Torah is, if it's a law from the Torah, nimshach hagilu, there's the revelation of godliness is drawn down on its own, from above to below. Lochin, therefore, gam ha'ora, therefore, the highest revelations you could possibly have, yocholovo, can come, l'mashech, and be drawn down by the Torah. You can start off with the number 13, you can start off with the number, whatever your number you want to. You can start off with it because it comes from the Torah. Who can stop God? Mimonei Hashem. Who can prevent God? May his name be blessed. Hayad Hashem Tiksor. God is some sort of lacking. God has some sort of a disability. Therefore, you can start off with the number 13. You can start out big. Because you got, which is not the case, Chanukah, but Chanukah is not a holiday from the Torah. Chanukah is a holiday from the rabbis. That they drew down this revelation. Okay, some people asked a question, good question. One second, if that's just from the rabbi, so how can we make a blessing? It's not from the Torah. So the answer to that is that God commands in the Torah that the rabbis should make blessings. So we should make commandments. And one of the things that the rabbis made also is the blessings. That's also true. But The blessing that we make after eating bread, that's from the Torah. But all the other blessings come from the rabbis as well. And there's a lot of commandments that are from the rabbis. Reading the Megillah. There's a law which is called Eruvin. Eruvin is from the rabbi. And Chanuka, the lights of Chanuka, the whole holiday of Chanuka comes from the rabbis. The whole Chanuka of Purim, right? It comes from the rabbi. Okay. All the fast days, except for Yom Kippur, all the fast days come from the rabbis. Tisha B'Av, etc. How can the rabbis do that? And we even make blessings because the Torah commands the rabbis. There's a big how do you say, confrontation between the Rambam, Maimonides, and Ramban, who lived much later, but nevertheless, if the laws of the Torah, because they include the laws of the rabbis, so maybe the laws of the rabbis are also from the Torah directly. A whole big argument between them is beautiful. It's actually beautiful. These such holy people. Okay. In any case, the fact of the matter is that the law Chanuka is a holiday which comes from the rabbis. So therefore, Chanuka comes from the rabbis. That they drew down to be this revelation. If so, cave, and since you have to draw this from below. We have to start. Therefore, it's impossible to start all big. In the beginning, we have to elevate from below to above. Therefore, in the beginning, we have to have one candle. And afterwards, you elevate, increase in holiness, etc. Now, in the Talmud, there's an argument between these two schools. Which should it be? And really, it's, both of them are tremendously holy, and both of them are right. It says, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chaim. All the opinions in the Talmud are all the word of God. How that figures out is impossible to understand. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. But that's because the Talmud comes from God. The Talmud comes from God. Not like the Christians try to make you think that the Pharisaical and the Pharisees, they're called the Pharisees, that's the Pirushim, they were tremendously holy people. They had the power to raise the dead. That was put on them this negative terms. That's just the evil of Christianity that did that. It's just a religion that's based on hating Jews. Somebody said they worship a suffering Jew, and they made as many Jews suffer as possible. But the fact of the matter is that the rabbis that instituted these laws were incredibly holy people. Like I say, it says over there, the least of them had the power to raise the dead. So when the rabbis instituted this law, so that nevertheless it comes from below to above, right? It's not a law that's written in the Torah. So therefore, in the beginning, they start off with one candle, and afterwards they elevate in holiness, and they increase in light. And that's finally what the decision is accepted. The decision is accepted like Beit Hillel. Even though the fact of the matter is if you do like Beit Shammai, you have fulfilled your obligation. Even if you only light one candle every night, you've done even if it's one candle for the whole family. Every night, the last night you only light one candle, you've done your obligation. So if you do it like Beit Shammai, you also do your obligation, but nobody does it. Nobody does, because the law is that we do like Beit Hillel. We'll do something like in Pesach and Sfirat Omer. On Passover, Hayagila, there was a revelation from above on its own that was revealed, and Melech Malchem Lachem, God took the Jews out of Egypt. And afterwards, they started counting. Then they count, okay, but then when you count yourself. Like it says, Sfartem Lachem. It's true, the counting the Omer. What is counting the Omer? There's a commandment that all the days, 50 days, the 49 days between Passover and the holiday of Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks, that's why it's called weeks. You count 7 weeks. And you start, the rabbis instituted, it's called Sfirat HaOmer, that every day has a different aspect of God that's connected to. And you start off with the beginning, Malchut or Malchut. You start from below. You start the lowest. Safartem Lachem. I'm sorry, 1 second. 1 minute. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. That is not right what I said. I'm sorry, sometimes I forget things. In any case, you start off with 1 day, and then you go to 2 days, and then 3 days, until finally you get to 49. right? Till finally you get to 49. The fact is, you start off with the higher sphere, not like I said. You start off with lower numbers. Start off with the lower numbers. First of all, you start off with 1, and then 2, and then 3. And Passover was a tremendous revelation from above on its own. And afterwards, you have to have Sfirat Omer for yourself. You have to fix yourself up. Today is the first day of the Omer, of purifying your animal soul. That's the 50 days between Passover and Shavuot, is to fix up your animal soul. So therefore, you start small. First day is 1, second day is 2. The Ein Omrim, you don't say Yom Sheni. You don't say the second day is the second day or the third day. You say the second day is 2 days. The third day is 3 days. In other words, every day is a higher level, a higher number than the previous days. And afterwards, you continue adding on. Okay, so counting the Omer, even though it comes from the Torah, but because the commandment is that we have to refine our animal soul. So we're starting from below. So we start off with a small number first. So it comes out in Sfirat Omer, which is an arousal from above, but it comes arousal from above, and as God answers us, but it's by means of our work from below. So therefore, you have to work slowly. Holich v'or. Beit Yomim. First of all, 1 day, then 2 days, then 3 days. This is something like Chanuka. First of all, you have 1 light, then you have 2 lights. But Passover itself, it's not exactly the same thing, because on Passover itself, which this is a revelation from above, Hariklolos or, first of all, you get all 50 days are drawn down. And then afterwards, when you count the Omer, that's revealing each one little by little. Something like when God created the world, right? He created the whole thing at one time, and then he revealed little by little afterwards. Everything, the first day, the second day. Also, from this, we can also understand what it says in Pri Etz Chaim, that in Sfirat HaOmer, when we do this commandment of counting the Omer, the 50 days between, 49 days between Passover and Shavuot, we draw down this level of the Makifim of Ema. And we draw down surrounding levels of what's called the understanding of God, of a Panini, but the inner levels we don't have the power to draw down, only in the time of the Beis HaMikdash. In the time of the Beit HaMikdash, they would really feel this holiness that would be drawn down every day when they counted the Omer, and the day by day, the 50 days from from Passover to Shavuot, the holiday of giving the Torah. This is what it says in the Shivei Roim. That's like what it says, the 7 shepherds. That the 7 shepherds, that's an inner level. The 7 shepherds of Judaism, they drew down a feeling of faith and inner connection and personality change to the Jewish people. The 8 anointed men, they drew down self-sacrifice. That's what see. That's the 7 shepherds, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, etc. They were like the light of God, which was in the holy temple. That's what it says, that God is my lamp. And then afterwards it says, God illuminates my darkness. That's already the 8 anointed men. Okay, so we have the 7 shepherds. That's what it says in Pri Etz Chaim. That's what it says in the 7 shepherds. Shehem, that they are panimim, that's an inner level. V'zeh menorah, which was in the Beit HaMikdash, 7 kanim. In the Holy Temple, they would go to the Holy Temple and they would feel love of God, fear of God, faith in God. They would feel a connection to God. God would fix up their personalities. Suddenly you felt that the most valuable thing in the world was to do what God wants, to love God, to care about God, that was in the Holy Temple. Everyone's personalities were fixed up to serve God, which is not the case nowadays in the time of darkness. Now we have to draw down from this level of the makifim, the surrounding level, self-sacrifice. That corresponds to what's the 8 anointed men. That corresponds to the 8 anointed men, the 8 candles of Chanuka. Therefore, the candles in the Holy Temple were 7. That corresponds to the 7 emotions. That corresponds something like to the 7 weeks, 7 times 7 weeks that we count in the 7 weeks, and each week has 7 days that we count in the Sfirat HaOmer, in the Sfirat HaOmer. That's something like that. But now the lights of Chanuka, we have to do it on our own, totally on our own. And that takes a power which is above normal. We have to jump out of ourselves. And that power is given to us. God helps us. God knew there was going to be such a thing as the exile. And that's what the 8 anointed men are. And by the way, an interesting thing, I mean, the Rebbe, that's why some people say the Rebbe is the Mashiach. It's a very interesting thing. There was one rabbi, he was a head of a big yeshiva, and he really spoke out against the Rebbe. He never really had any logic, any reasons why he spoke out against the Rebbe. It was purely political thing. But in any case, he couldn't. So somebody finally asked this rabbi, what have you got? I mean, he increased a tremendous amount of hatred and discord in the Jewish people to this very day. But anyway, so they ask him, why do you hate the Lubavitcher Rebbe? I mean, you don't know 1/100th of what he knows. You don't know anything about Kabbalah whatsoever. You don't know why. Have you ever read anything that he's written? You have any idea? And I'm going. So why do you hate him? So it's because he sits in Brooklyn and he makes the world crazy. In Yiddish, it says, sitzt in Brooklyn and macht meshuggah der Welt. He's making the whole world crazy. And this rabbi couldn't take it. Couldn't stand it. And that's the truth. It's the truth. That's really what the Rebbe wants. The Rebbe really wants to make the whole world crazy, especially the Jewish people. And that's the idea of these 8 anointed men. And that you have to just jump out of yourself and you have to stop looking at, the situation in a normal way and say, listen, the odds are just too great. I'm just going to join the enemy. I'm going to join the enemy to the point where maybe there's no enemy. He's my friend. And that's what happened in Chanuka. And the Jews said, listen, the Greeks, they're just too many. They're too powerful. And not only that, they're too attractive. They're too how do you say, appetizing. Why should I join with them? They're willing to accept me. I feel, why should I feel threatened by the world all the time? Here, the world is accepting me. I just become part of them. So in order to go against this, you have to have a power which is above understanding. And that comes from the 8 anointed men. Ubachol anal, and all this we can understand the idea of Kabbalat ol Malchus Shemayim Shekadma ol Mitzvahs. Why we have to accept, first of all, the yoke of heaven, and then we can accept the yoke of the commandments. What does this mean? In the first paragraph of Shema Yisrael, we say that you have to love God b'kol meodecha. You have to serve God with all of your being. That's what's called accepting on yourself the yoke of heaven. Accepting on yourself the yoke of heaven means I'm not going to call the shots. God's going to call the shots. I'm not the boss. God is the boss. I'm not the king. God is the king. I'm not the creator. God is the creator. I'm just a creation. I'm just a servant. I'm just listening to what God says. That's accepting the yoke of heaven, like an ox. You put a yoke on an ox. And then you can say, okay, whatever God says, I'll do. And then you start to do what the commandments are. Okay, this does not mean that you should not use your mind. You should turn off your mind. You should be a zombie. I mean, listen, it could mean that, but the fact is that that's not what God wants, right? God, if that's what God wanted, then that's what we would do. We would just, I don't think that many people would do it. Maybe more people would do it. Could be, could be more people would do it. If we just said, listen, you do the commandments, you go to heaven. Don't do them, you go to hell. It could be that there would be more religious Jews. Could be, I don't know. But that's not what God wants. What God wants us to understand Him. God wants us to be happy. But first of all, before you start to be happy, and before you understand God, and before you come to love God, before you come to fear God, before you have any sort of a personal relationship with God, number one, you have to wipe the slate free, clean. You have to say, I'm not in this whole Judaism business for myself at all. At all. I am a creation. I am a servant. I am doing what the Creator wants, what the Master wants. That's the basic. One of the things the Creator wants, and the Master, what does He want, is that we should understand, and we should have enthusiasm. In order to do that, you have to understand. But first of all, we have to accept the yoke of heaven. God, you're the creator. I never created anything in my life. You're creating me. I'm going to do whatever you say. And then after that, you can accept on yourself the yoke of commandments. Among the yoke of commandments is to love God, to be happy. And that means you're refining your animal soul. The animal soul is simply your feeling of self. I'm going to do it. I want, I think. Like it says, Ner Hashem Nishmatanim, like it says that the light of God is the soul of man. Even though this is what's called Espeklaria, even though this is what's called a vision of God, which is not clear through your animal soul, but nevertheless, it's Kodem all mitzvahs. First of all, you have to fix up. You have to negate yourself, if you want to call it. And then you can start doing positive things. And the commandments, it says that's what's called a clear vision of God. Okay, how is this going to be? We're going to talk about this. First, that's going to be the idea of the battle that the Jews fought against the Greeks first. And then afterwards, they lit the lights. That's number 2. First of all, we have to battle against our own certainty and that we can listen to our own urges and our own feelings, number 1. And after that, then we can make light in the world. First, they had to defeat the Greeks, and then they lit the candles, as we'll talk about more, God willing, tomorrow. Now let's learn the Devar Malchut.